So good morning or good afternoon to you all, depending on, I guess, where you're located in the world. Just for reference, Michael, my co-presenter, and myself are located here in Auckland, New Zealand. So it's early morning for us, hence the reason we might look in the dark a little. Welcome everyone, and thank you for attending this webinar on the psychology of internal communications. So my name's Philip Nunn, and I'm going to be one of your presentations for the next 30 minutes or so. And I'm joined by Michael Hartland. Mike has been with SnapComms for around 3 years. He's a pretty seasoned internal communicator. His responsibilities at SnapComms include pretty much all of our content creation. And I guess if you're a reader of our blogs or our newsletter, then you're sure to have come across Mike's work before. So do you want to say hi, Mike?
Yeah, thanks, Phil. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Nice to meet you all. Just to return a favour to Phil, so Philip Nunn, he's the General Manager of Business at SnapComms. He's been with the company for 7 years or more, I think, so he's extremely seasoned. So Phil's a bit of a guru when it comes to internal communications and employee engagement. He's worked with customers all over the world, all sorts of sectors, and he regularly speaks at events like IABC and events like that. So you may have seen him at IABC the last couple of years. So here's a man who knows what he's talking about. I'm glad to be here with him today.
I like the way you said that I'm well seasoned, Mike. Thank you. All right, thank you. And we've also got with us a couple of our amazing customer success teams. So today we've got Beth and Sydney. I think many of you probably already know them, and they're always here to help as best they can. Today they're going to be moderating the chat and the questions, and ideally answering some of those questions as we go through. And of course, you feel free to contact your customer success manager after this presentation if you've got further questions or comments. And do you just want to say a quick hello, Beth and Sydney?
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, thanks both. All right, now before we get into it, just some housekeeping. We're going to record this session. Everyone's muted, but feel free to ask questions through the chat portal. We're going to pause at certain points throughout the session in order to answer any of those questions that have been asked. And I think we'll also hopefully have some time at the end of the presentation for further Q&A. And on that, we think that if you like, the presentation side of things is going to be around 30 minutes, after which I'm going to try and jump into my SnapComms environment, Content Manager, and hopefully show you some practical examples of what we're talking about. So without further ado, let's get started. Just before we start, I know that Mike and I can kind of get carried away here and start to talk quite quickly. So if at any point you think that we're moving too quickly or too fast, then just put a note in the window. And Beth, Sydney, if that is the case, then just let us know, and we will slow down. Anyhow, firstly, an example. I think we've probably all been in this scenario from time to time. You know, we're launching a new tool, a process, or some system. We're all excited. We're pretty fired up. You've had an all-staff meeting. You've sent an email around to everyone, but actually, no one's really that engaged. They're confused. They're not potentially getting your message, and they're not reading your email, and they're actually probably more likely to be thinking about something which is a bit more pleasurable, like lunch, for example. I don't know if that's a familiar story, but this kind of example highlights an unexpected and an often undesired employee response to a business communication. So this communication was important to you as a communicator, but I guess this is the same for every other department that we interface with. So HR, IT, marketing, in fact, any business function, they've all got important messaging. So why do some messages get through and not others, and why are some more successful? And if we knew this, how could we change our way of messaging to ensure that every message that we send is successful? Well, turns out that it really is all in the mind. And in this presentation, we're going to share 6 insights from psychology that influence employee behavior, start to look at the implications for internal communications, and then suggest recommendations for how you can take advantage of these in your workplace. So our first insight really is around environmental influence, and people are hugely influenced by things that they see around them, often without realizing it. And the stimuli of a word or a picture can continue to influence long after being exposed to it. And there's a pretty famous example that I'm going to use to help illustrate this. Now, hopefully, some of you are familiar with Derren Brown. He's an English illusionist or mentalist, I think they now call him. I don't know if that's a positive or negative connotation, but anyway, he's well known for getting people to kind of act in outlandish or uncommon ways, and he achieves this through a concept called message conditioning. And he manipulates environmental aspects to influence people's behavior. And he does this by purposely using visual cues such as street signs, clothing, displays, billboards, all these types of things. Now, there's a really great video on YouTube that illustrates this, and the link to this video will be shared in the information pack following this presentation for anyone that wants to watch it. But effectively, the story here is that two advertising executives are asked to pitch a concept for an animal afterlife company. Now, the center pic that you see on the slide here is Darren comparing what he drew beforehand to the pitch that the executives came up with. And they're actually almost identical. Darren drew out a stuffed bear playing a harp, sitting on a cloud in front of some heavenly zoo gates. And he called this company Creature Heaven. Now, the advertising executives called their company Animal Heaven, but they also pitched a stuffed bear playing a harp on a cloud in front of heavenly zoo gates. It was almost identical to what Darren had drew beforehand, but which they'd actually got no prior knowledge of. And Darren had constructed visual cues that the advertising executives subconsciously absorbed. Now, around the main pic here on the slide, you can see screen grabs from a very carefully controlled a cab ride the executives took around the city of London in this case. They passed a coffee shop that was called Creature Heaven. They passed a group of school children wearing sweatshirts with zoo gates on them. They actually go past London Zoo and so on and so forth. But all of these were purposely planted visual cues by Darren in order to influence the thinking of the two executives. So why does this actually work? And there's a concept in psychology called priming. And it refers to visual cues that prime people to act in a particular way. So if you're into DIY, think of the primer that you put onto a bare metal or a piece of wood. And if you're into makeup, then I'm told that you should add a base primer. And effectively, this is the thing that goes on first and prepares that base layer for the main material that goes on top and allows better adhesion and better durability. So how can we relate this to the workplace? Well, priming can teach us that employees will respond to internal communications basically based on how they've been influenced. Excuse me. We can use visual cues that will prime employees to act in a particular way, and their willingness to engage is largely dependent in part on whether they've been suitably primed or not. And if we get repeated exposure to these cues, we can start to modify any underlying assumptions that the employees may hold, and we can thus start to drive behavioral change. So practically, how can we make use of priming? Well, we could use teaser material before the launch of a new tool, a process, or a campaign. And if you think of visuals like posters or written communications, so snippets in a newsletter, for example, but for big workplace announcements, like a restructure or a corporate announcement, we can use signposting campaigns to refer in advance to the situation that's going to cause the change. But the whole point here is it's about increasing employees' familiarity with the subject, priming them. And this priming allows employees to be just much more receptive. There's less of a surprise when events happen, which in turn makes them more accepting of the changes, the impending changes. Now, the second insight that I want to share is to avoid cognitive strain. And it just turns out that humans are hardwired to avoid things that are hard to understand. If our brains need to work hard to extract the meaning of something, we tend to give up and we start thinking of something a little less taxing. So as communicators, we should really always be trying to avoid that cognitive strain. Now, these examples of iconography are absolutely instantly recognizable. They're very simple, but they're very rich in their content, and they make complicated messaging understood easily. So just think of them as mental shortcuts. They avoid the need for your brain to think. We know what they are before we need to have any more context. In psychology, this concept is called salience, and people pay attention to things that appear easy and accessible. And for internal communicators, this means creating communications that are personally relevant and easy to digest versus messaging that is lengthy, very technical in detail, or irrelevant to the target audience. Remember, we want to just avoid that cognitive strain. So again, tying this back to the workplace, put simply, employees respond faster to messaging that is easy and accessible. Research tells us that messages that are presented consistently are up to 4 times more likely to be recognized by staff. So think of it as a mental shortcut. People also prefer things that they're familiar with, and being familiar with something increases their likelihood of taking action around it. But conversely, unfamiliarity just brings effort. So here's a pretty common example. It's an all staff update, and it's coming from the human resource team. It's always presented bottom left. It always has the same logo and symbol. It's always got the same color, things like that. But because it's presented in this consistent manner, employees recognize the message much faster. They're more familiar with it, and they're more likely to read and act upon it. And now here's another example, which I guess we're all now pretty familiar with. So Teams always presents bottom right. It's always the same color, layout, etc. But it's this consistency in appearance that increases the familiarity and our likelihood to engage. Now, I've spoken for probably long enough for the time being, so I'm going to hand across to Mike just to take us through the next few insights. But before I do that, I just wanted to have a quick pause and see if there are any questions that have come in from the audience. Beth and Sydney?
Yeah, so we have 2 questions so far. The first one is, when it comes to priming, have you seen a workflow using your tool and other tools that can lead to greater impact?
Well, anything really around campaigns. So this sustained messaging, if you like, on a particular subject. So screensavers, digital signage, wallpapers, lock screens, really great for that type of thing. And these are really all about education. So though anything you're looking to educate your audience around, they're a great example for how you could use priming.
Okay, and then we have another one. Do you have any examples of using symbols to avoid cognitive strain and how effective they can be?
Yes, is a short answer. We're probably going to run through a few at the end of this session anyway. But an obvious one is kind of IT outages. So you get a red exclamation mark with a bold outline, kind of signifies that there's an alert or danger, if you like. Things like padlocks signify cybersecurity. They're all around us actually, and when you start to look at them, you realize just how many of these things we're actually influenced by. But we'll take a look specifically at some of those as we go through the demo at the end of this session. All right, no further questions. I'm going to hand across to Mike.
Thank you, Phil. Excuse me. So insight 3 is around liking what's popular and how this is not just a superficial thing, but actually turns out it's quite an important survival mechanism for us. So it's no secret that we all like opinions that match our own. We feel secure with them, they bolster our confidence, they reduce our feelings of tension and frustration. For example, think about the way that you use the internet. You're reading reviews online for somewhere you've just stayed on holiday, or maybe you're browsing a public forum about an event which has just happened in the news. When you're doing this, do you find yourself gravitating towards those posts which mirror the way you feel and reflect the opinions that you already have? I'm sure you do, because it's only natural to do it, and I find myself doing it all the time as well. But it turns out the way that we unconsciously seek out these like-minded opinions is more than just superficial. It's actually an important survival mechanism for humans. But to find out why, we have to take a quick trip back in time for a moment. Okay, so I haven't just snuck in one of my photos from my family photo album here. This is actually a scene from our caveman days. Back in the days when tablets were made of stone rather than shiny metal and plastic, and when clubs were used for hunting rather than for dancing in. As humans, we've survived because of our ability to band together. The caveman ancestors that we had who formed groups were the ones who were much more likely to survive. Those who distanced themselves from the group tended not to last very long without the support of the group. And that's because being part of the group or following the crowd allowed us to function in complicated and fast-changing environments. And that's as true in today's digital workplaces as it was in the prehistoric past. And since those days, social psychology has shown us something quite interesting. It's shown us that like-minded people reinforce one another's viewpoints. The beliefs we hold are strengthened when we're around other people who hold similar views. And a great example of this is advertising campaigns. You've probably seen some of these types of images like you can see on screen at the moment. Next time you're watching television in the evenings and the commercials come on, don't just leave the room to make a cup of coffee or just ignore the ads. Take a look at the type of language that they're using in there. You will have seen some of these, I'm sure. Most popular, fastest growing, best selling. The advertisers aren't trying to persuade us that their product is any good, only that other people think so. They're playing on the fact that popular is good, and that's what helps them sell products. But what does this mean for employee communications? Well, as people, we inherently trust our peers more than we trust officials. And as communicators, we can all use this to our advantage. The next time you're planning a campaign, maybe to launch a new promotion or kick off a new business transformation project, identify the key influencers and thought leaders amongst your employees whose opinion is trusted and is sought by others. And then once you've found these people, target messages specifically to them and involve them in your campaigns early, ideally in the very earliest planning stages. By doing this, these employees can then become valuable change agents who can help to convert others. That is to encourage others to come on board, react and respond the way you want. Just go back up a slide, Phil, please. Thank you. Just one more quick point to make on this. Another good idea with this is to introduce online employee discussion forums, or to make use of them a bit more widely if you already have them set up. Because while these discussion forums can sometimes be used to spread negative messages or inaccurate information, they're also a very valuable way of identifying these key influencers if you haven't been able to identify them in any other way. And how can you find these people? Well, they'll be the ones who are commenting most frequently, their opinions are being asked for, and they're receiving lots of thumbs up reactions from their peers. So getting these people involved and on your site early is a great way to leverage the power of popularity to improve your communications effectiveness. Okay, insight 4, this is around emotional resonance and how messages are much more effective if there is an emotional stimuli attached to them. So to start off, think of a movie, book, or song that you love. One of your favorites, one of the ones that you know inside out, you regularly watch, listen to, read every year. I know for me, this is the Shawshank Redemption, for example. I know for Phil is quite partial to Love Actually. Chances are the reason this is one of your favorites, it actually isn't. I'm just giving him a dig there.
I don't mind it.
No, I don't either, to be fair. Chances are these books, movies, or songs, or whatever, are one of your favorites because you feel emotionally connected to them somehow. And that might be because of the lyrical content, it could be a narrative theme, it could even be the person that you experience it with. And it's this that forms your connection with the book, movie, or song, or whatever at a deeper level. And that's because we as humans tend to remember things more strongly and more vividly if they have emotional resonance. But let's try another example though. So here's an example of a message with emotional resonance and a big scary dog on it as well. How does this message make you feel? Does it make you likely to take action after you've seen it? Would you still be willing to knock on the door of the house which has this sign on it to deliver some mail or ask to borrow some gardening tools? Probably not, right? Messages like this are effective because they trigger an emotion, in this case, fear. There's no way you're going to knock on the door of that house unless you happen to know that the big scary dog is actually just a friendly little poodle. But let's look at another example as well, which also plays on emotional resonance and also coincidentally has a couple of dogs in it. Now, these are a couple of stills from reasonably well-known toilet paper commercials from a few years back. The top one is from the UK and the bottom one is from the US. So these ads trigger our feelings of love and security. We feel love for the cute puppy, so by extension, we believe that the toilet paper must be pretty soft and lovely too. And studies have shown how experiences with emotional stimuli are much more effective at engaging us than non-emotional stimuli. We devote more of our attention to them, we remember them more vividly and more accurately, and perhaps more importantly, we can recall the details much more easily over time. And what does psychology tell us about this, and how can we bring this into the workplace? Well, psychologists refer to something called affective events theory, and this states that our emotions act as filters through which events shape our attitudes and behavior. Now, this can be in the home, like when we're watching a cute toilet paper commercial, or it can be at work. What it means in the workplace is that we tend to react to situations in a certain way due to the emotional resonance from similar situations in the past. What do we mean by this? We mean if we had a positive experience with something previously, being exposed to something later that reminds us of the previous experience can promote a similar positive feeling. And the same is true of negative experiences. A negative experience in the past can make us feel negatively about something later if a stimuli attaches itself to it. So consider change communications for an example. Every organization around the world, sorry Phil, back up again one.
Beg your pardon?
Change communications, yes. Every organization around the world has gone through a huge amount of change this year. But employee messaging, which conveys empathy, solidarity, and support from leaders, will make the period of change much smoother for everyone. And equally as important, it means that when the next change comes, and if 2020 has shown us anything at all this year, it's that more change probably will be coming, it means employees will be more accepting of it and less resistant to it. And one of the best ways of tapping into emotional resonance for employee communications is storytelling. Now, this is a great way of bringing even the driest of subject matters to life. So research from Stanford University has shown that stories are up to 22 times more memorable than facts alone. So when you use data and stories together, your audience is being engaged on both an intellectual level and an emotional level. And the easiest way of doing this is by making real people the focus of your messages. For example, your story isn't about your organization's commitment to staff development and personal growth. It's about how amazing the experience has been for Steve in accounts, how much he's achieved, how much he's grown, how much he's enjoyed the experience. When telling a story, you're taking listeners on a journey, moving them from one perspective to another. So by using storytelling in your employee communications, you can make the scenarios you're talking about feel more real, more tangible, and that encourages employees to buy into the message and to come along for the ride. So for communicators, or for all of us as communicators, this area of emotional resonance and storytelling is a ripe area to exploit for improving message cut-through. When planning your campaigns, when constructing your messages, consider the emotional element of the words that you're using and the visuals you're showing. Think about what the message means at a personal level, not just a business level. And this is even more important if your campaign is about a sensitive subject or if it's delivering bad news. Remember, communications that target the heart as well as the mind are much more likely to generate the response you want from staff. Okay, insight 5. This is about the appeal of positive versus negative news and how both have appeals to us, but for very different reasons. So we all love a nice positive story, right? Well, it turns out the answer is actually yes and no. As humans, we're attracted to both positive messages and negative messages for very different reasons. And this is something which is also true in the workplace. And it's something we as internal communicators need to take notice of. So first off though, let's take a look at the appeal of positive messages. So you're probably familiar with Pavlov's dogs, and these 4 graphics you can see on screen here are 4 sort of summaries of stages of this experiment. But in a nutshell, this was a famous study by Russian psychologist Ivan Pavlov. Now he noticed how the presence of a bowl of dog food triggered an unconditioned response in his dogs. They started to drool or salivate. He then used a bell as a neutral stimulus, and there's no drooling, no salivating. Next, he rang the bell as he gave the food to the dogs. And then finally, he rang the bell on its own without providing any food to the dogs. And the dogs continued to drool or salivate, but without the presence of food. Pavlov had demonstrated how dogs had become conditioned to respond a certain way because of their desire for something pleasurable. In this case, to eat some yummy dog treats. And it's a similar principle in humans where positive messaging can be used to appeal to our psychological desire for pleasure. But the full story is actually more complicated, but much more interesting than that. Negative messaging or bad news also has an innate appeal to us. And there was an experiment done at McGill University in Canada which illustrates this nicely. Participants were asked to join a study about news, but they weren't told what the purpose of the study was. When asked at the beginning of the study, participants claimed they preferred stories about good news. They said they felt the media was far too focused on negative stories. And then during the study, participants were observed interacting with a news website where all of the pieces of content that they engaged with were tracked. And the results showed that participants more often chose to read stories with a negative tone about governmental corruption, about setbacks, about hypocrisy, and so on, rather than the neutral or positive stories that they claimed they liked. It's evidence of what psychologists call a negativity bias, our desire to hear and remember bad news. So remember the caveman days we were talking about just before? Psychologists believe that this is due to humans being wired to react quickly to bad news to avoid potential danger. So there's a concept in psychology called inattentional blindness. And this describes how we fail to notice something obvious but unexpected because our attention is devoted on something else. And for us in our everyday lives, what this means is being fixated on headlines and missing the details. And in the workplace as well, there are lessons we can learn from this when communicating with our employees. Firstly, we can improve the adoption of positive behavioral change. If employees are consistently shown both the negative consequences of non-compliance, such as a loss of status in the workplace, and the positive consequences of compliance, like greater social approval, higher personal satisfaction levels, they'll automatically begin to associate pain with non-compliance and pleasure with compliance. So drawing these consequences out clearly in our messaging is how to get employees past the attention-grabbing headline and to actually understand the message and to respond appropriately. We can also use this to minimize the impact of delivering bad news. In times like this, inattentional blindness means that employees will only notice the headline and they'll miss all of the important detail inside the message. So to counter this, it's important to communicate often to reinforce key messages, even if you feel like there's not that much new to report. And keep track of when employees have last heard from you. This will give you a good cadence of when you need to reach out to them again. So by doing all of this, it can raise staff awareness of the details, inform them of the evolving situation, and most importantly, involve them all in the resolution. So that's the end of Insight 5. So I'll be handing back to Phil in a sec to handle the sixth and final insight. Maybe this is a good pause, a good moment to pause to check to see whether there's any questions have been raised by anybody in the last 15 minutes.
Yes, we have some. So the first one I have here is, how can we convey a sense of popularity or make something go viral in internal comms?
All right. Yes, I understand the appeal of that well. Writing for a living and trying to get my content all over the internet, I understand the appeal of popularity and having things go viral. I think there's a few ways of doing it. I think interactivity is always good. So using quizzes and things might seem an obvious mechanism, but that they are great, particularly if you can hook in the ability to share your results with the wider employees. So if I happen to do a quiz and know I got 9 out of 10 for it, and I know Phil only got 6 out of 10, I'm probably going to share that as widely as I can. So I think that's one thing. I think asking employees to contribute is good as well. I think employees like to see their peers contributing, and that can help them be more willing to share content more widely. And also take a leaf out of the social media book and include thumbs up reactions and those sort of things, because seeing those numbers tick up is a great endorsement of the popularity of content, not just for the content creators, but for everyone who's reading it as well.
All right, and then we have another question here. With SnapComm's alerts or tickers, we tend to keep our messages shorter so they are easier to read. How would you recommend we weave a story in less than 200 characters?
Yeah, that would certainly be a challenge. I think probably in the first case, it's probably worth considering whether the channel that you're using is right for storytelling, because while some certainly are, some probably best suited for other types of messages. But I think in a nutshell, probably you shouldn't feel like you need to have the whole message or the whole story given away in your initial message or notification. I think maybe it's sort of approach it like a teaser, like it's a movie trailer. The content you put in your notification could just be something to whet the appetite to set the scene, and then include a link through to your intranet or another online platform where you have the whole story and we'll show the whole movie, as it were. So I think maybe just treat it a bit like a teaser to whet the appetite more than to give the whole story away. Okay, if those are all the questions we have, in that case, we'll keep it moving. Awesome, thank you. We'll pass it back to Phil for Insight 6.
All right, thank you, Mike. Thank you, Beth, for the questions. So the sixth and the last insight that we're going to share today is really this whole concept of attention management. And we're living in a world of kind of ever increasing distraction. So there's a real competition for our attention. And I have to write this down. I've tried to memorize this, and I've failed in every time, I think. So let me read this, and I'll read it a couple of times. So the attention that we give to things leads to the experiences that we have. The experience that we have determine the lives that we lead. So to lead the lives that we want, we need to control what we give attention to, and that's the whole concept of attention management. And I will read that again. So the attention that we give to things leads to the experiences that we have, and the experiences that we have determine the lives that we lead. So to lead the lives that we want, we need to control what we give our attention to. And so this is the concept of attention management. So hopefully that makes sense. Kind of takes a little bit to get your head around it. But look, here's a typical day in the office or at home, as perhaps more likely at the moment. There's perhaps less office distraction, but Teams and Slack and email are all still competing for our attention, and we know it can take kind of 10 to 20 times duration of the interruption to get back on track. The information, excuse me, the information overload group estimates that 28% of an average workday is eaten by information overload. And attention management is a deliberate attempt by individuals to get that control back in their day. And all that equates to 8 hours per employee per week. So these distractions and information overload cause an individual to have this sense of a loss of control. And as I said, attention management is really that deliberate attempt to wrestle that control back. Now, obviously, this is a bit of a problem for internal communicators. You know, staff are being selective. Well, what guarantee do we have that ensures those important messages, and I guess all messages are important, but anyway, those important messages are being seen, they're being understood, they're being acted upon? But the answer, unfortunately, there isn't any guarantees. Just the ease of sending messages mean more messages, too many of them, are being sent, which decreases the effectiveness of all of them. And it's even more challenging when you start to add in, you know, other departments. They're all communicating for attention using pretty much the same tools as you guys are. So overcoming attention management is really only possible through improving the relevance of your content and how it's being delivered, and targeting relevant content that helps staff do their jobs at the right time via a channel that suits them is key to getting your messages read. So multi-channel communications work because it aligns your content with the channel that's best suited to deliver it. So for example, email is absolutely fine for, you know, pretty lengthy business updates, but it's a terrible medium for critical, time-sensitive communications. But by using a multi-channel communications platform, you can maximize the best attributes of each channel, but minimize any weaknesses. And so we've actually come up with with a concept called the communication spectrum, and hopefully some of you have seen this before. But we use this to plot how an organization communicates. And we know we've got a range of different communications across a typical business enterprise with quite different messaging needs. But understanding this spectrum has been pretty essential for us in constructing ways in which we can help organizations communicate much more effectively. And having a balanced communication landscape that uses multiple means of communicating with its staff, depending on the intended outcome, really helps to drive staff engagement. So if you look on the screen here, we've got a spectrum that ranges on the left-hand side to very critical, for example, emergency or urgent communication, across to more social information, so workplace culture, well-being content. And there's some definitions of, you know, the urgency in terms of being able to read it. So for an example, on the left side, it's I need to read this now to be safe. Whereas conversely on the right-hand side, I'm going to read this if it interests me and if I've got time. And then you've got everything else in the middle. And then there's just some examples of the types of communications that they could be underneath. But this isn't something that is set in stone. I mean, this does vary from organization to organization. But to finish off that spectrum, we've kind of juxtaposed how the SnapComms channels actually fit in this spectrum, so you can relate your actual communication needs to a channel that can help you meet them. So we've got alerts and tickers, which tend to be more attention grabbing, more bound to something that's time-based, but they're pretty versatile. So you can use them across, well, you can use them with different configurations across pretty much the full spectrum. But if you follow that through with other modalities such as screensavers, quizzes, surveys, newsletters, lock screens, wallpapers, and so on, you can start to see that these varying different delivery methods can enable you to fulfill a pretty wide array of your communication needs. Now, obviously, we know that SnapComms is unlikely to be the only communication platform that you use within your organization. So what we've tried to do here is to be a little objective and plot how other communication tools fit across that spectrum. And I appreciate this is somewhat subjective, but we've really tried to look at the strengths of those platforms to see where they're best suited. Now, obviously, we feel that SnapComms has got great coverage across the full spectrum because we've got that great diversity of channels. But I think it's worth considering that of the tools and platforms that you have within your organization, you know, how are they being used? What's the communications outcomes you're expecting? And does that actually align to this spectrum? Are you using the right tool for the right messaging? And does that achieve the outcomes that you need? So just to summarize before we have a look at some practical examples, I know we've gone through quite a lot here, and again, you will get a copy of this presentation, but we've looked at insights into psychological concepts, some examples of how we can relate these to the workplace, as well as how we can potentially use these to our advantage as internal communicators. So firstly, we talked about priming and how contextual or visual cues can condition employee responses. So remember Darren Brown and how he influenced the advertising executives campaign just by manipulating the environment around them. And incidentally, if you haven't watched that clip, or Darren Brown in general, I definitely encourage you to do so. He's a pretty interesting character with some quite interesting experiments. But the second insight we shared was really all about avoiding this cognitive strain, the using of mental shortcuts to help the brain just process that messaging faster, and making sure that we make our messaging easy and accessible versus difficult to digest and detailed, or worse, even irrelevant to the target audience. Now, thirdly, we touched upon how our cohorts can influence far more so than officials, and the comfort and support of peers, knowing and being able to harness this can really help when we start to introduce change to an organization, for example. Now, the fourth insight was all about emotional resonance and how if we use emotion in our communications, it can really help us to get that message cut through. And emotional resonance means that messaging is just more likely to get attention and to have a much deeper, stronger connection with the individual. So if you call your favorite movie, Mike, I think was a Shawshank Redemption, and apparently mine was Love Actually. So we'll have to change the examples for next time. But we then talked about as humans, we all love a good and a negative story, and the fact that when receiving bad news, we tend to fixate on the headline, not necessarily the detail. We also talked about how reinforcing a positive compliance can appeal to our innate psychological desire for pleasure, as well as keeping a regular drumbeat of communication to ensure employees see past the headline and we limit what we call that inattentional blindness. And our last insight, which I just shared really, was all about how as humans we're all managing our attention, whether we're doing this consciously or subconsciously. We talked about how we can avoid messages getting lost in the general swirl of workplace communications, and how using a multi-channel communications platform can really help to ensure that the right message is delivered to the right employee in the right way at the right time. So hopefully that is as an accurate reflection of what we talked about. So what I'm going to do now, how are we doing for time? We've got 40 minutes, so we've got a little bit of time left. So I'm going to jump out of this presentation and I'm going to start up my content manager. But before I do that, I need to turn off my webcam because unfortunately I need to move my laptop to be able to access my screen. So just bear with me for a second. So hopefully you can see my content manager. Yeah,
yep,
Mike, can you confirm? Yeah, good. Thank you very much. And I think we've got a kind of a combination of both customers and individuals who aren't customers. Hopefully they will become customers on the call. So just a little bit of an orientation here. This is what we call our SnapComms Content Manager. This is where we create all our content. It's where effectively your admins will log in I say create messaging. It's where you do all your administration, you get all your reports, you can see who's been reading things, etc., etc. So this is an online portal that your guys log into, and you can start to create your content, etc. And we try and make this as pretty easy as possible. So we've got some nice big buttons that kind of help orientate people as to what it is they're trying to do. But that's only half the story of SnapComms. The other half, and hopefully you can see my app. This is my SnapComms app, and this is, I've actually just moved that around just so I could see it a little bit easier, but it normally would appear on the bottom right of your screen, and this is in my taskbar, and so employees can access that SnapComms app anytime they want, and they can re-access messaging that's been sent to them, assuming it hasn't expired. So those are the two elements to SnapComms, but I'm just going to close that down here. All right, so just I've got some content that I've actually pre-created, so I didn't have to go through and create all of this content from scratch. But I just wanted to try and, I guess, give some practical examples of how you would use that. So you can see I've got some here that relate to priming, some positive reinforcement. Actually, let me just refresh the view of that. So priming, hopefully that goes in the order that we talked about them. Avoiding cognitive strain, salience, so liking what's popular, and then at the end of this I'm going to try and, well, we'll go and create some content from scratch so you can just see how easy it is to create some of these content using our new use cases. But well, let's take a look at an example of something that we could use for priming. So remember, this was how we we apply a base layer so people are more receptive to learning, etc. So in this case I'm using a screensaver. We've talked about screensavers being a good example of educational campaigns and so on. And this one here is, obviously you would publish this, and it helps to build a layer upon which you can start to talk more about cybersecurity. So trying to reinforce that behavior, etc. So we feel that screensavers, and particularly around the subject of things like cybersecurity, where you're trying to maintain, if you like, a certain level of understanding around a particular topic. Screensavers, lock screen, wallpapers, those types of things work very well in these environments. So let me just go back to, I just need to move a few windows around, just bear with me for a second. GoToWebinar is great, but it does fill your screen with lots of things that are potentially unnecessary. So let me go back to the folder that I was just in. And so the second one here is quite an easy one, right? So I think we talked about this a little bit. So how we can use iconography around, making sure that people understand these before they even really consume the message. So this is really all about a system outage, and I'll just use a preview to show this this function. Hopefully you guys are familiar with our preview. It's a great way of understanding whether your content is hitting the mark in terms of what your intention is. So this is an IT outage, and you'll see that actually for us, this is SnapComms actually, we put all of our service disruptions at the top of the screen. They always follow a certain pattern. They may be an alert, they may be a ticker, etc. But we can see that in this case, people will start to understand that this message is, hey, an incident has started. And a lot of people use red for this. We just use orange because I guess for SnapComms orange kind of suits our brand a little better. Etc. But conversely, when that incident is over, so when you go back to you want to send out a message that says that that particular event has finished, then we would use this type of alert to the audience, and it's a really easy way that people get it. Oh yeah, I've got it. I understand. I know that we've got an issue has started. It may be that we deliver updates through that as well, but hey, guess what? This one's completed. So we've got a nice green tick. Again, a tick is a good example of something is positive, and in this case we've said, yep, SharePoint's back online, and okay, got it. So I really know without reading this message what these things are around. So that hopefully those are good examples that we're sharing. Let's go back and have a look at some more. What else have we got in here? So here's a nice one that I like to go. So everybody likes to see that new employees are being hired. So this is, I guess this comes back to kind of liking what's popular. And a peer, it kind of alludes to the peer, and having the ability for your peers to provide reactions, etc. So this is again one of our use cases. In this case, we're introducing Alicia. She's one of our customer success managers. She's actually not on the call today, but it's a great photo. So we tend to use this one quite well. And if you don't know Alicia, it's actually worth reading this. She's got a degree in fine arts, and she's actually an opera singer, which is quite an interesting combination. Anyway, let me preview this, so you'll see how this this appears. And again, we're trying to do this message conditioning. So again, now we're using, hey, it's not an IT, for example, alert. This is something that relates, it's a bit softer. It relates to people and culture. So in other words, it sits in this area of the screen. So we're starting to build where does, but we're consuming these messages almost subliminally based on where they're appearing in the particular screen order. Okay, that's enough of Alicia. So let's go back and see what else we've got. Hopefully these are making sense anyway. These perhaps one a bit more, perhaps one that's a little bit more, if you think of that communication spectrum, so left being critical, right being social, here's one that probably sits in the middle. So this is actually a compliance message. Now everybody loves getting compliance messaging and compliance training, I'm sure. Getting people's attention when it comes to these types of messaging can be quite difficult. I know from personal experience that what tends to happen is you get an initial email, and then you get, and let's just preview this one, you get an initial email, and then you get another email, then you probably get an email from someone further up the chain, until it gets to the point where it's like, okay, you really need to sign this, etc. So this is an example of how we've used a direct on screen alert. So in other words, this is something that we want people to take advantage of, we want people to take notice of, and they need to comply with this new in this case, working from home policy. In this case, we're kind of saying, okay, you can remind me later, but at some point we're going to have to do this compliance. So, but making use of these channels is really the key to ensuring that you get employees' attention and don't introduce message fatigue. Okay, so I think what I'll do now, we've got a few minutes, well, we've got actually 10 minutes or so left. I'm just going to go and create something from scratch here, because I guess you can get the view of what we're talking about. So I'm going to take advantage of our use case templates. So hopefully some of you guys are familiar with that. And by the way, we're about to introduce a change to this screen. If we haven't done it already, I'm not sure how up to date My Content Manager is, to make it much more easy to discover new use cases, because we're ending up at the moment with quite a long list of things, and we've reworked that, and we've made a change in terms of how accessible it is to individuals to get to some of these messages. So I'm going to look under my people and culture area, and you can see I've now got a whole bunch of people and culture use cases that I can see. As I roll over them, you'll see that I get a little icon to the right hand side that kind of talks about what it is, but these are really intended for you to use with minimal changes, so you can get about things, you can go about your day, you know, quickly and start to get things completed. So I'm going to use the Employee of the Month award. So I'm going to click on, that's what I wanted, that's what I want to create. I'll give it a theme, so I'll give it my SnapComms theme. I need to give it a name, so let's call this Mike. Mike, you're going to be, oops, Mike employee, if I can type, and I'll just create my content. And one of the things that people, what actually our customers told us was, SnapComms is great, but actually everyone's time poor. Nobody really has a huge amount of time to spend on making great content. So what we've tried to do is take that pain away. So we've already made this kind of look pretty nice. So all you've got to do now, we've given some suggested text, but of course you can change that to be whatever you wish. And in this case, I'm just going to make a change and make this to be, oops, just go back to here. So this will be Mike, and it's his outstanding efforts. I'm not sure that you did any cloud migration, Mike, but anyway, let's assume that you did. And so, look, that's really easy for us to kind of to make that change. So if I do a quick preview. and then I'll publish it to my content manager. So hopefully you can see that it will arrive. So again, this is a HR, people and culture type alert or message. So we put it on the bottom left of the screen, reinforcing that condition, etc. So yep, that looks like how I want it to appear. So I'll close the preview and I'll just give this a quick publish. And with a bit of luck and a following wind, it will, I just want to send it to me. Oh, I haven't got any targets set. Hang on a second, I've got to do a few things here. So let's just send that to me. Apply. So yeah, you can see I've got my target set. I'm sending this for a month, but in reality, I'd probably would leave it for a month. It's the employee of the month, so I would. But if I've got content that I wanted to do less than that, then obviously I would change that date. So I'm just going to publish this, and then you should hopefully see it arrive on my screen shortly. And after that, then we'll just check to see if there's any further questions, and then we'll be done. So I'll go back to my dashboard, and I can see that my message is arriving. I think there we go. So there's my SnapComms Employee of the Month. So thanks, Mike. Nicely done for your cloud migration project. I don't think you had a lot of effort in there, but anyway, so I just clicked on it and away I'm done. But hopefully that gives you some idea of how easy we've tried to make. And there's a whole bunch of these, and we're just going to continue to keep building on these use cases in terms of creation content. So these have been a fairly fun type of use cases, but obviously you can see that we've got more serious ones such as around compliance, policies, service disruptions, etc., code alerts within healthcare. Hopefully we'll provide some good use case templates that you can use straight away without having to be particularly creative, and make sure your communications look great. So with that, I will just flip back to the PowerPoint. Let's just get, here we are. And I think we should be back on there. I'll put my webcam back on, I'll move my PC and see if there's any further questions.
Coming in. We have questions coming in.
Good, okay.
Sydney, did you want to take the first one?
Yeah, so the first one is, how can we best understand which channels are appropriate for each type of message?
I'll take that one, Mike, if you like.
Sure.
Okay, so well, again, you'll get a copy of this deck and really start to look at, have a look at that communication spectrum. I think that gives a great start in terms of, okay, here are the types of things, the types of communications we have within an organization. Let's start to look at, okay, how are we sending those types of messaging? Does it fit within that framework? It doesn't have to be perfect, but I think that, for example, if you're sending, let's use an extreme, if you're sending hey, there's a shooter in the building, or there's a fire in the building or something like that, so something that's really mission critical, and you're sending that via email, then that's probably not the right medium. And I appreciate that's obviously oversimplifying as well, but those are the types of things I would start to look at. What communications am I sending in my organization, and what is the medium that I'm using to send them? And is that the optimum way to be doing that? Let's not just settle for, okay, well, that's what we've always done, we always send them that way. Let's start to look at how do we make sure that we maximize our responses. Hopefully that helps.
Okay, we've got another question here. I really have enjoyed all of this theory of psychology of communications, but I'm in a help desk. Our messages are simple and direct. How do you think this can be applied to our IT audits messages or cybersecurity warnings?
Mike, do you want to do that?
Yeah, sure. I think hopefully from the examples that Phil just showed before, it's pretty clear how you can use some of these for IT-related messages. I think whether they're messages where staff need to take action quickly, so for service disruption, if they need to use an alternative system or something while one is down, I think alerts or high visibility channels are effective for that. But then equally for messages which require behavioral change, like cybersecurity. So taking employees from sort of a level of understanding of cybersecurity which might be quite low or quite superficial through to exactly what they need to do. Educational campaigns for that can be very effective. So screensavers and those type of even digital signage if you happen to have big signage screens up in your workplace. So I think any sort of environment really, and IT particularly, can really make use of some of the insights we've shared today and apply them in your communication channels.
Okay, we have another one. Why did you put the HR messages in the lower left corner? Is there a particular reason or?
No specific reason that it's bottom left. Could be top left, could be other areas on the screen. Oh, I'm sorry, Mike, I'll take this one. No particular reason, but what we do want to do is build a dedicated space for that type of message. So you start to build this message conditioning around, okay, well, in this area, these messages are likely to be around this type of topic, versus, for example, top right, and these are just how SnapComms uses the product as well. So versus top right for us, that is used for more urgent notifications, so service disruptions and so on. So, but we know that people will start to associate that location based on the the type of message it's likely to be. So, and then people again start to react faster, it's more accessible, etc., etc. So that's why we've differentiated it and put it in bottom left. But it doesn't have to be bottom left; it could be somewhere else. But it's that differentiation that we're trying to get. Any other questions? If not, I will. I'll end the show. I think we're 4 minutes early, so hopefully you get a little bit of time back in your day. If there are no other questions, then look, it'd be great to receive any feedback that you guys can give us in relation to, I guess, this topic and I guess how we're doing generally. So if there are any thoughts on that, then please drop them in the chat or send them through post this particular session. And so any other questions, Beth or Sydney?
No, that was it.
Okay, all right. Mike, did you have anything else that you wanted to add?
No, I don't think so. Just thanks to everybody for joining. I know there's a lot of webinars out there these days, so thank you for joining us today.
All right, great. Thanks everyone, and I think it's daylight for us now, Mike. So we've gone through the dawn.
Tiny lapse of the light coming up behind me.
Okay, thanks everyone, and have a great morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you.